I wanted to re-record my Dallas Mavericks preview video for this season. I know the mic was popping a little bit, so I wanted to re-record it just to give it a better sound, be a little easier to listen to. So I'm just gonna go ahead and just kind of rerun through everything. So if you already listened to that video, then you can probably just skip this one. But I want to talk about the Mavericks coming up. I'm obviously a huge Mavericks fan. Always have been. Grew up in Dallas. Went to Game 3 of the Finals in 2011. Went to tons of games. Painted my body. Got in for free. For those of you who don't know, one of the things Cuban did when he bought the team is that if you painted your body or that kind of thing, there was opportunities to get in for free at every game. I went and saw Jordan's last game in Dallas. We probably done it about a dozen times. So always been a huge Mavs fan since day one, even in the 90s when we were horrible, when we were one of, if not the worst NBA franchise there for a while. But yeah, I wanted to go ahead and preview this season. I'm extremely excited about this year, even more so. I think this year is going to be a good setup year. Again, I expect us to win and do good and compete, but I'm really hoping one of a couple things happens this year that I think is really going to open the window up for us next year. But first, I wanted to talk about Jalen Brunson. He's obviously, in terms of the off season, he's the biggest thing that happened to us after getting Christian Wood and Javale Mcgee. But a lot of Mavs fans or basketball fans in general thought that us losing Brunson was kind of a big deal or a huge loss. I personally do not think so. I do not think Jalen Brunson is worth $26 million a year. Not even close, to be honest with you. I think he's a 20 mil max guy. I honestly think he's more like a 15 mil year guy, but he could prove me wrong, but he's definitely not a 26 million a year person, in my opinion. What was so frustrating about that, I guess, is that we obviously wish we could have got something in return for him instead of just letting him walk. Hindsight being 2020, we obviously should have signed him to the extension earlier in the year or at the beginning of last year, which was kind of like a big talk of the town if we were going to think this guy's going to develop and become a good player or not. Obviously, that would have been the optimal two things would be to get something back for him, or we should have signed him to the extension, which would have been much cheaper. But that being said, $26 million a year for a player like Brunson, I have absolutely no problem letting that go for me personally. One of the things I don't think, at least when I watched Brunson play, him and Luka, even though a lot of people may not agree with me, but him and Luka have very similar styles, very similar ball-dominant sort of styles of play on the offensive end. To be honest with you, it was very frustrating to me, in my opinion, watching him and Luka play with each other. The ball, in my opinion, the ball just stopped moving. There was kind of no fluidity to the offense whenever those two guys were in. And it's just a style thing, right? It's not necessarily that one is bad and one is good, or they're both not good, or what have you. It's just kind of a style clash, in my opinion. Brunson is obviously a little physically and athletically limited, which, he's in the NBA, so he knows what he's doing, right? But I think there is a bit of a cap on him in terms of his athletic ability and his physical stature. One of the kind of an example I can give is, I remember watching Brunson a lot of times would kind of drive to the lane. And if the shot wasn't immediately there, he would come to a jump stop or something and pivot in the lane, and he would get himself in a lot of trouble sometimes. And for a guy of his size, you can't do that in the NBA. If you compare and contrast that to someone like Luka, if Luka gets in trouble in the lane or gets to the lane, and the shot's not immediately there, I mean, he's 6'9", he can fade, he can do any number of things that allows him to sort of get out of that situation or turn it into a positive. Brunson, not so much. Him and Luka are both very ball dominant players. They kind of need the ball in their hands to kind of run the offense through them or to create. And so those two together, it's not a good fit. I never liked it. For our team, given the other players that we have, I honestly think Brunson's most optimal position would have been sort of kind of like being the leader if Luka is not on the floor. And given how he performed at the end of last year, he's commanded more than just that kind of role in terms of salary and responsibility on the team. So that was never going to happen. But again, $26 million a year. And a good rule of thumb is that if the Knicks are really set on something, or if they're really sure about something, then you should probably go the other way. So we'll see what happens. Brunson may end up making me eat my words, and if he does, more power to him. But I do not think he's going to live up to the $26 million a year contract that the Knicks signed him to. Also, as the kind of situation was unfolding, one thing I learned that I didn't know beforehand is that apparently sign-in trades are one of the more difficult transactions or trades to do in the NBA. I guess a lot of things kind of have to happen, or there has to be some kind of agreement between teams on what's going to happen, which is sort of difficult. Which kind of makes sense, right? Why would you sign and trade a player if the other team that you're trading him to can just sign him directly without giving anything up? So that made sense. And, again, it's unfortunate that we didn't get something for him or that we didn't sign the extension, but it is what it is. And, $26 million a year, I am more than happy to let him walk. Maybe if management could tell me that, hey, we're going to sign him for $20 million a year, $22 million a year or something, and, the goal is to trade him or do something with him or package him or something. For example, if we could have maybe packaged him and Bertans and Powell for a trade or something like that, that'd be a great move. If I could be a fly on the wall and that's what they were talking about, then maybe I could be convinced. But for $26 million a year, I find it very, very hard that he's going to live up to that contract. He's going to have to average like 25 and 10 as a point guard for that contract to be worth it, in my opinion. $26 million a year, you can't just be a game manager at point guard. You have to produce, you have to make a lot of plays, you have to lead your team to some victories. And I'm just not so sure Brunson's quite that player. I think he's a good third. If he's your third or fourth guy, I think you're sitting pretty. But if he's your second best player, I don't think your team's going to go very far. And if he's your best player, especially, your team's definitely not going to go very far. And I also felt he was a little limited on the defensive end. I think he is going to get exposed a little bit as the years go on. Again, that's just my opinion. Again, he can make me eat my words, and if he does, again, more power to him. So just want to touch on the Brunson thing. I know a lot of Mavs fans are maybe a little down on losing him for nothing, but I wouldn't be. I think we've improved this year overall from a player and talent standpoint. I think a lot of Mavs fans maybe feel that we took a sidestep by losing Brunson and getting Wood and Mcgee. I think it's actually an improvement. If you could have told me at the end of last year that you can move Brunson's production to a different area of the floor, to a different part of the team, then obviously I think most Mavs fans would agree that if we could move his production to the front court somehow, people probably would have taken that trade at the end of last year, given that, our biggest weakness is definitely the front court. And so, to me, getting Wood and Mcgee sort of in exchange for Brunson, if you want to kind of look at it like that, getting those two guys in the front court and losing Brunson, I think is an improvement, in my opinion. I think Wood brings so much more to the table than Brunson offensively and rebounding. Rebounding was one of probably our biggest weakness overall, was rebounding, especially on the defensive end. And so I think Wood and Mcgee are going to be a massive upgrade compared to Brunson. Also keep in mind that we are getting Tim Hardaway Jr. back. And if you kind of want to look at losing Brunson and getting Tim Hardaway back, I mean, to me that's a bit of an even trade in the grand scheme of things. Maybe you could say that the fact that Brunson can bring the ball up the floor and he's a bit of a leader or plays the point guard position on a team, that maybe he does a little more than Hardaway. But just from a production standpoint, I do not think there's much of a difference between those guys just in terms of, maybe just looking at points per game. So knowing if Tim Hardaway can come back and just be somewhat of the player that he was, 90%, 80%, I don't think we're going to lose much in the backcourt in terms of Brunson if Hardaway can come back and produce it all. So that being said, we move to Christian Wood and JaVale McGee. Wood looked amazing in the preseason game on Friday. The first unit that they threw out there, which I don't think is going to actually be our starting unit, they looked very good. I think Wood and McGee are going to do wonders for Luka. The fact that you have a guy like Luka who's kind of likes to bully his way to the paint, if you can get Wood to stretch out a big man and open up the floor a little bit for Luka, as well as someone like McGee who can stay home around the basket and keep people honest, I think it's really going to open up a lot of easier shots for Luka throughout the year. If you can see McGee sort of filling that Tyson Chandler role in 2011, I think it's very much the same. We don't need McGee to do much. Just be a presence around the rim and catch lobs whenever they come your way, and that's pretty much it. Rebound, be a presence on the defensive end, and catch lobs. And with someone like Luka who can create as much as he does, I think if you compare what sort of McGee had around him in Phoenix, Phoenix doesn't have a lot of guys who can kind of get to the hole as Luka does, right? Booker's spends a lot more time out on the wing. Chris Paul, has definitely fallen off a little bit. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, him and McGee could have been a pretty good pick and roll threat. Looking at how Luka plays in terms of trying to get to the basket and he likes to put people on his hip and kind of bully them down into the paint. I think that's going to open up a lot of opportunities for Luka as well as McGee. And if you have someone like Wood who is stretching the floor and is sort of opening up the floor even more, I think that's going to benefit everyone, including the shooters. And again, this team has a lot of 3-and-D guys. Dorian Finney-Smith, Reggie Bullock, Tim Hardaway Jr., Green's shot. Apparently Green's been working on a shot. Of course, that's yet to be seen, and he's going to have to prove it. But Green's a great defensive player. This team is very deep on the wing. I like what we have on the wing. And again, if McGee can kind of be that big ugly that, sort of patrols the paint, defensively, I think this team has improved, which is saying quite a lot because, we had quite a good defense last year. And, of course, Bullock and Finney-Smith were a big part of that. Essentially, we can switch any team all day out on the perimeter with the guys that we have, which is a big advantage. And sort of hides weaknesses on the defensive end. If people cannot switch and get matchups they want, and you're so confident in your defensive players that they can switch and guard anyone, offenses are going to have a lot harder time exposing a weakness. And I'm kind of hinting to Luka here that I think Luka getting exposed as much as he did in that one or two games last year in the playoffs, I think is not indicative of how bad his defense actually is. I think we will see a little bit of an improvement on that, as well as I think Kidd is going to adjust and make sure Luka's responsibilities on the defensive end are not exposed like that again, or at least that's the thought, right? And having guys on the wing who can switch and not allow a team to sort of exploit a matchup is a huge advantage on the defensive end. And, Luka also looks, a half a step lighter this year. It looks like he's lost 5 or 10 pounds. So I think Luka's going to be much better on the defensive end. And obviously we need him to be 100% come playoff time. And I think last year we kind of got worn down a little bit. And largely, I think that's because we lost Tim Hardaway Jr. I mean, you lose a guy like that in your rotation, everyone's minutes increases. And over an entire season, and you go into a game 7 in the playoffs, and you're kind of getting, you're getting grinded down essentially, can have quite an effect. So the fact that we're getting Tim Hardaway Jr. back, I think, helps alleviate the pressure of people playing so many minutes or getting worn down. I also think Hardy, the guy we drafted this year, I think Hardy, we'll see. I think Kid's going to throw him out early and often when he gets opportunities to see what this kid can do. And in my opinion, he looks very much NBA ready. In my opinion, I think it's quite possible he could contribute quite a bit this year. If Hardy, I think offensively in terms of a slasher, I think he brings a lot to the table, and I think his defense is pretty good. You could see some real dividends from him down the line in terms of what he can do for this team. Again, we don't really need him to score. We just need him to be good energy, be the youth that we know that you are, and bring that sort of high energy that we know you can bring. And I very much look for Hardy in some ways to fill the role that Brunson had in some small ways. Defensively, I think Hardy's much better. Obviously, offensively, probably not. But again, offensively, I don't think we need much. I think Wood is bringing more than enough extra firepower, along with Hardaway Jr. coming back. I look for our offense to be a little better as well. And the defensive end, I think we've improved as well. I think we have a much better front court now. I think there's no arguing that. And what we've lost with Brunson, I think, is minimal compared to when you look at, the depth that we have on this team in terms of the wing. In the beginning, I'd kind of mentioned I hope that this year sets us up for the years to come. And largely what I meant by that is, all I want for Christmas is for us to trade Davis Bertans' contract. Bertans probably has the worst contract in the NBA, $16 million a year to play 10 minutes a game. Sweet gig for him, but and I understand also Bertans was part of the Kristaps Porzingis trade, so you have to kind of remember that. But if we can take that Kristaps trade and then turn Davis Bertans into another trade, probably one of the best outs an organization has ever made in terms of getting rid of a star who maybe is hurt or didn't quite pan out the way they wanted them to. And I'm still okay with us when we took the risk to get Porzingis. If you want to win a title, you have to take risks from time to time. And, a lot of people, I think maybe the average fan tends to want to play it safe more than take risk. I think because I think there's a little bit of a time preference there, right? They don't want to do something that could make them not good in the near future. I am much more let's take a risk. And again, if it doesn't pan out 2-3 years in the grand scheme of things, to me isn't a big deal. If you take a risk that you think is possibly going to make you a contender or will set you up to maybe make another move or get another player to be a contender, I think it's worth it 9 times out of 10. Unless the deal is just really stupid or the move is obviously not in your best interest. But for the most part, right, I am okay with a team taking risk if it is a honest move in which you think is gonna put you over the top or take you to the next level. I'm more than okay with that. And it's kind of like a lot of people hate on Jerry Jones, right? Because it kind of seems like he takes dumb risks from time to time. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with taking risk, especially if you don't already have a contending team, right? If you look in the locker room and you say, we're not quite sure if we're a championship caliber team yet, maybe we're one step away, take the risk. I'm okay taking the risk. I'd rather roll the dice than constantly play it safe. And, that's just my 2 cents on it. So Again, getting out of the Porzingis contract was amazing, and I'm glad we got Spencer Dinwiddie out of that. We obviously won that trade so far. Unless Kristaps just comes back this year totally healthy and is averaging, 25 and 10 like he used to, which I don't think he will, then, perhaps we could maybe say we should have waited another year. But so far we've won that trade, and Dinwiddie's really been the difference. Now, that being said, Davis Bertans, I think, has two or three more years left on his contract. I think he'll have 2 more years after this year. So we'll just see. He has 3 years left, including this year. So he's making $16 million a year. What would be really nice, if we could somehow package him and maybe a Josh Green, although Josh Green's only making $3 million a year, so not a big deal there. We can keep him. That's not a huge thing. But if we could somehow package $16 million a year with Davis Bertans and Dwight Powell, who's making $11 million a year. Again, I like Dwight Powell. He brings good energy, but in terms of an NBA player, he is very limited. He's essentially a pick and roll, 4 spot, really. I know we have him kind of as a center, but in my opinion, he's really like an athletic 4. Just my 2 cents. He's very limited. He doesn't have a good shot. He obviously has high energy, very athletic, but even like in terms of rebounding on the defensive end, he's kind of limited. He's going to get bullied if he's your center, I think, in the long run. But he's making $11 million a year, and again, he is not worth that $11 million in my opinion. And to think that we could possibly package Dwight Powell, Bertans, that'd be $27 million alone, and maybe we throw in a Josh Green to make it $30 million. I'm not totally opposed to trading Tim Hardaway Jr. either, or Spencer Dinwiddie. Those guys are making a lot of money. I'd rather keep them, but if we had to maybe throw in, because obviously trying to move Powell and Bertans is going to be hard. But if we had to throw someone else in there like that, I would be okay with that. I do not want to get rid of Bullock or Finney-Smith. I don't think those guys should go. I think they bring too much to the table on both ends of the floor for us to get rid of them. But to think that we could possibly trade them, like for example, there were some rumors that maybe we would take Russell Westbrook. Not so much that we want Russell Westbrook, but he has a massive contract that expires this year. And, considering what our team is, I mean, we would just need Russell Westbrook to be energy and be a slasher. Really, that's kind of all we would need him to be, even though he'd be overpaid, way overpaid to do that. But to think that we possibly could have moved a few contracts and got Russell Westbrook, depending on who they wanted, that's also an option. Somehow clearing up this cap space. Any way we can do it. I trust Cuban to try and do everything he can. I'm praying to God that he is trying to move Bertans' contract. I literally have nightmares over this guy's contract. I would do almost anything to get rid of it. And to think that we could possibly move a few guys and open up 30 to 40 million in cap space, or hopefully maybe get another bona fide all-star next to Luka. Again, if we can make that move this year or maybe in the offseason next year, that's when I think the window for the Mavericks is truly going to open with, Luka being on your team. Right now, I just feel we're one guy away and we have a couple bad contracts that's kind of limiting us. If we can do something with those guys, if we can get anything in return, I think you could really see some opportunities come about in this next offseason after this year. And that's really, I'm very excited for this year. I think we're going to do good. We're going to compete for our division. I expect us to be 5 or 6 in the West at the worst. I think we are built for the playoffs, a little more now that we have Christian Wood and JaVale McGee. I think those guys are going to bring much more to the table than people are thinking or what people realize, in my opinion. I think the way that they are going to play off Luka and the fact that they are going to sew up a couple of our biggest weaknesses, at least we hope that we sew them up. The Mavericks, I think, are going to be really tough this year, man. And of course, all eyes are on Luka, but this team from top to bottom, I'm very smitten with, if I could say that word. But again, I hate Davis Bertans' contract. I think it's the worst contract in the NBA. If we could somehow package him and a few guys and make a move or two either this year or in the offseason next year, I think the Mavericks will be bona fide contenders. And I know I don't say that lightly. You know, I try to be as level-headed about this stuff as possible. But looking at the team we have, the players and what they do, if we can trade, you know, again, I'm okay. If we want to trade Tim Hardaway Jr., if we're able to package him with Bertans and maybe Powell, I would do that in a heartbeat. I mean, we're talking about over $40 million in cap space if that were to happen. Or you would be getting something really good in return, hopefully an all-star minimum. You know, I think you could see this team become quite the roster. No one could deny that they would be a contender if we could make a move like that. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents. I wanted to re-record this because the other one, the mic was popping and whatnot. But I'm very excited for the Mavs this year, man, and even more so, depending if we can make a move or two, I'm doubly excited for the year after. And I love the players on this team. I even like Bertans. You know, like, I don't mind Bertans' game. He's going to pull that thing from anywhere, which I always like and respect. But just for what he's making, it just doesn't add up. Same with Powell. So, you know, if we could somehow move those guys or what have you, then I think you could see the Mavs' roster improve even more. And depending on what they're able to do with that cap space or get in return, I think there would be almost no denying that we would be one of the better teams or best teams in the league in terms of on paper, which, you know, you kind of have to at least start on paper a little bit, right? You kind of have to look at your roster and say, what do we have here? But I love our depth, and I love the fact that it really feels like any number of these guys can step up any given night, score you 20, 25 points. And really, I mean, that's really what Luka needs, right? I mean, the thing about the Mavs, and I know this is kind of a cliche, but given our defense and given the attention that Luka gets, I mean, really, guys just have to hit a few shots. You know, it really is as simple as that. If you look at the games where the Mavs shot decent, I mean, they run people out of the gym, and it's not even close. And so, you know, Luka just needs a little help on the offensive end. I think that our offense is well-rounded in terms of guys who could step up any given night, but we just need a little bit more consistency. And again, I think Wood is going to bring that consistency. I full well expect Wood to score 16, 18, possibly 20 points a game average this year. And with him and Mcgee rebounding, in terms of that being our other big weakness, I'm very excited for this year to see what we can do. I think this team can play any number of ways. I think we can play fast if we want. I think we can play half court if we want. I think we can get to the hole. I think we can shoot the three. You know, Luka obviously is going to bring his mid-range game and things like that. So I'm very excited for this team. I think we're well-rounded all over the place. Again, if I had to critique us, again, we'll see. While I do think Wood and Mcgee are going to kind of sew up our front court, along with, you know, I know Maxey's a bit of a stretch big, but Maxey on defense definitely plays down low, along with Powell. You know, our biggest weakness is probably still the front court and or having a second ball handler to Luka. And when I say ball handler, I don't even mean scorer, but just that when Luka's not in the game, or if we can somehow in the rare situations we need to put Luka off ball, someone else has got to fill that spot, be able to sort of run the offense a little bit or create something, get something going. So I think we've improved on our weaknesses. I don't think we've gotten worse anywhere. You know, if you think we have gotten worse because we lost Brunson, I don't agree with that. I think we have plenty of people who could do what he does, especially with getting Hardaway Jr. back. And so, yeah, I mean, I just am very excited for this year. I expect the Mavs, again, to finish at least 6 or better in the West. And the West is an absolute dogfight again. It's kind of crazy to think that, when I was coming up, late 90s after Jordan retired, early 2000s, that kind of era, the West just dominated, right? I mean, even though it was kind of surprising that an East team would pop up and win a ring every so often, just top to bottom, the West was so tough. And that being said, I think the West maybe now is even more stacked than what they were back in the 2000s, which is saying a lot. But the West is stacked again, and we're going to compete with Memphis for our division, and we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I'm very excited for this year. I think the Mavericks ceiling is as high as it could be, and I think we obviously have the capability to win a ring. I don't necessarily expect it to be done this year, but the absolute bare minimum is to make the playoffs. I think the minimum goal is to get back to the second round, and I think the overachieving goal would be to get back to the Western Conference Finals. And of course, I think if the ball bounces the right way here or there, I think we can win a championship this year. Luka is that good, and again, we proved it last year that we can at least get to the Western Conference Finals, right? So it's at least in sight. We can at least see it, proven we can get there. And so yeah, I just want to re-record this. I'm really stoked this year. And again, I'm not so much stoked this year about the win-loss, but I am hoping that we can make a move or two in terms of some of these contracts and players, or make a trade either during the season or off season. And I think that could truly open up a window for us in the next 2, 3, 4 years. So yeah, that's it.